Chinese students are being brainwashed about how terrible Ukraine is and how great Putin's invasion is. And it's even creepier than you think. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Shelley Zhang, filling in for Chris Chappell, who's hopefully enjoying his vacation and not just doom scrolling on Instagram. Seriously, Chris, put down the phone. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are friends. Best friends. I wonder what their text messages look like right now. Probably a lot of this. Now, no one understands an authoritarian leader who's trying to reclaim his historical territory better than another authoritarian leader who's trying to reclaim his historical territory, which means, so far, these guys are sticking together. And one way to do that is to make sure everyone knows your bestie is right and the guy he's fighting with is wrong, even if it means brainwashing a billion people, especially the children. While externally, the Chinese Communist Party has been careful not to be too supportive of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, internally, it's another matter. Quietly, they've done things like using Huawei to help Putin stabilize Russia's internet, and censoring anyone who isn't supporting Russia's invasion, including people who are calling for peace. They even censored cries for help from Chinese students trapped in Ukraine. Hey, but deleting those cries for help wasn't a big deal, because they were completely unnecessary. According to Chinese state-run media, all Chinese nationals trapped in Ukraine have been safely evacuated to other parts of Ukraine. Thanks, Motherland. When Russia's invasion first started, Chinese media initially easily slotted the Russian invasion into a narrative where Russian President Vladimir Putin was the put-upon hero, and NATO and the West were the malevolent villains. I mean, every story the Chinese Communist Party tells has the West as the malevolent villains. And the lack of good information inside China led to Chinese netizens just making up their own news, like how Ukraine set fire to its own nuclear plant. Yes, totally not because of a Russian attack. But the most telling sign of the Chinese Communist Party's stance on the Ukraine invasion is how it's being discussed in schools. I'll show you after the break. Welcome back to the Chinese Communist Party's real stance on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Get ready for class. And that's just the warm-up. It gets more intense. And that's not just one isolated classroom. Online videos show this is a trend. You know, like a viral TikTok dance, but way more aggressive. This is now officially the creepiest viral trend. It almost makes me miss the Harlem Shake. And it's even creepier with older students.
谁的兵？你的兵。谁的团？你的团。国际局势风云突变，乌克兰成为世界瞩目的焦点。乌克兰曾经是20世纪末最土豪的国家，因为前苏联解体时，作为次子的乌克兰继承庞大的军事遗产。第一遗产，
核武器库，其中威力最大的是洲际导弹、撒旦导弹，无人能敌。
第二遗产。
主战坦克有6000多辆，其中时速最高可达70千米。
第三遗产
，3艘航空母舰上面装备300多艘战机，可以随时待命出征。
第四遗产，
世界最大战略轰炸机图160，它的外形很优美，被誉为白天鹅。
Why are Chinese students being forced to recite all of the different weaponry Ukraine had? The real lesson here is that Ukraine used to be strong thanks to the Soviet Union, but now it sucks.
乌克兰这个败家子儿继承了前苏联这么庞大的军事遗产，现在 却成为了最遗憾的国家。从这个事件当中，我们懂得了什么道理？
And if that's not weird enough, there's this. Hey, surprise! It turned into a TikTok dance after all. The choreography could use some work. But the key part of the lesson actually comes right before the dance routine, when the kids start talking about self-reliance. That particular phrase comes straight from Xi Jinping, who spent years emphasizing China's need for self-reliance. Self-reliance is important in case the rest of the world gets really mad at the Chinese regime for its unfair trade practices, massive COVID cover-up, aggressive territorial expansion, and, genocide. And then the world stops giving China money. Hey, a girl can dream. So in this lesson, Ukraine isn't just an example of what happens when you want to join the evil West, but also what happens when your country is not self-reliant. But there's also plenty of the West is evil stuff too.
老师，俄罗斯为什么要出兵乌克兰呢？
因为有纠纷，因为乌克兰要加入北约。下面讲一个故事，你就明白了。
Okay, I'm going to spare you from having to watch this entire thing. So, let me summarize. In this morality tale, Russia and Ukraine are the sons of the Soviet Union. Sure, older brother Russia and younger brother Ukraine have some family squabbles, but everything is fine until Ukraine decides to throw it all in Russia's face by embracing Russia's worst enemy, NATO.
刘老大搞这么一出，我想把老二拉回来。老二犯原则错误，我得揍你。但 M 国一直在背后搞小动作，忽悠老二颠倒大干。
罗老大这回态度坚决，本着国家利益至上、国防安全第一的原则，强势出兵，战争便一触即发了。
你们有什么感受？
国际局势风起云涌，复杂多变，我们并未生活在一个和平的时代，而是生活在一个和平的国家。
感谢祖国，在你的怀抱里，我们是如此的幸福。
Yes, we are so happy and fortunate in your embrace. Somehow I didn't get the sense that teacher wanted to know what those kids really thought about that story. But from the Chinese Communist Party's perspective, these stories about Ukraine and Russia are actually about America and China, and of course, Taiwan. Ukraine was weak and unself-reliant, and was therefore manipulated by America. Russia was justified in invading its little brother Ukraine in order to save it. And someday, a self-reliant China will be just as justified when it invades Taiwan in order to save it. You know what they say, motherland knows best. And now it's time for me to answer a question from a fan who supports China Uncensored on the crowdfunding website Patreon or the exclusive social media platform Locals. On Patreon, Laura J. asks, with all those sanctions on Russia and Russian banks and businesses, and even video game companies are starting to boycott and stop sales from Russian civilians, how come the West is so quick to defend Ukrainians but not the Uyghurs and all the minorities that the CCP has been abusing and invading for decades? In fact, they even invaded other people's countries and independent sovereign territories like Hong Kong, and the West didn't do much about it. I already know why, because the West cares more about actual sentiments and a lot of it being bought out by the CCP, but I just want to hear what y'all think. Wait, is this how I ask you guys questions? Well, Laura, yes, this is how you ask questions. You can leave a comment in a Patreon post or direct message us. Look, it's easier for the West to stand up to Russia than China for a lot of reasons. One, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is happening now. It's not a thing that happened 70 years ago, like China's invasion of Tibet. China took over Tibet and East Turkestan and southern Mongolia long enough ago that these areas are officially recognized as part of China by other countries. And it's geopolitically harder to pressure a regime to stop abusing its own people within its borders. I mean, for years, Putin poisoned people and imprisoned political opponents, suppressed protests, and did several other special military operations, and he didn't get the reaction he's getting now. Meanwhile, the US and the EU have sanctioned China for the genocide of the Uyghurs, which is definitely a step in the right direction, but the West should be doing more. 2. Russia's invasion is being done with military force, unlike China's takeover of Hong Kong. That was done through an agreement with the UK. Russia is also invading another country. Ukraine has been a sovereign nation for 30 years, unlike Hong Kong, which has been legally recognized as being part of China since 1997. Before that, Hong Kong was a British colony. Hong Kong was never an independent sovereign territory. Any freedoms Hong Kong has had since 1997 were granted under China's one country, two systems policy. China promised to let Hong Kong keep those freedoms for 50 years. But as the Chinese Communist Party demonstrated back in 2020, they could take those freedoms away anytime they wanted. And they did. Now, if China invades Taiwan, which is an independent country, that's a different story. And 3. It's easy for the US to sanction Russia because Russia is a much smaller economy than China. For the most part, the US doesn't need to trade with Russia. US-Russia trade is less than 1/10 the size of US-China trade. And China is much more enmeshed in the global economy than Russia is. That's why you don't see McDonald's, Starbucks, or Coca-Cola being willing to pull out of China like they're doing in Russia. Thank you for your question, Laura. And thanks to all of you who support China Uncensored by contributing $1 or more per episode through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Visit patreon.com/China Uncensored to learn more. And thanks for watching China Uncensored. I'm Shelley Zhang. See you next time.